Baltimore Ravens enter the 2025 offseason with a couple of tough decisions that need to be talked about internally. My name's Tyler, here with my brother Ryan, and we're going to talk about those decisions externally with you all and what we think they should end up doing. Before we get into that, though, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, tackle that bell, and also leave a like and a comment. Let us know what you want to see the Ravens do this offseason and why. Ryan, let's pull up the free agents here so far for the Baltimore Ravens. Big list as of right now, or as you can see right here. But there's really only, in my opinion, a couple of main names that we'll talk about here. It's going to be Ronnie Stanley, Brandon Stevens, Patrick McCarry, and O'Darius Washington as well. Everybody else below that, they did contribute a significant amount of snaps, I think, for the Ravens this season. But I think they can be replaced in some form or fashion, or maybe they can be re-signed at a pretty relatively team-friendly deal for $1.5 million. But Ryan, any of these guys, though, I think below the names outside that I mentioned, you think actually are a strong candidate to return to the team this year?
No, not really. I mean, Trey White, Nelson Aguilar, I think are interesting veteran names, both getting older and in the uh kind of the last lap of their career. But
Yeah.
I do feel like they could potentially come back on like veteran minimum contracts and be on the roster that way. But no other guys I feel like at this point that are gonna be eh, at like a huge loss if they don't return to this team. So
Yeah.
with that being said, let's just jump right into some of their internal moves that we made to kind of clear up some cap space. So at the start of this exercise, the Ravens were at about 12.8 million, I believe, in cap
Yeah.
space.
Yeah.
Uh and so to kind of free up some of that space so that we can make some moves, we ended up what is it, restructuring Lamar Jackson's contract. Basically, just I think they pushed up some of the money, gave it to him up front, and then cleared up some cap space that way. Another way that we cleared up some cap space was we did restructure Mark Andrews' contract, kind of taking away some money from him just because he is on the chopping block, I think, to be a potential cap casualty. So instead of just cutting him outright and letting him hit the open market, I feel like the Ravens will just renegotiate his contract. Maybe he gets an extension and draws it out the same amount of money over multiple years, but I
Yeah.
do think they restructure his contract there.
His cap hit would be just shy of 17 million without a restructure.
Yeah.
And outside the divisional game with the drop, and that's what's just very interesting and kind of awkward about this conversation. But you do go look at his production though, and it's like Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, Isaiah Likely. They've been eating into his targets to his snap share, and
Hmm.
like he's still, I think, top 10 tight end in the league. It's so, but I think also to the direction of the offense, the way that it's been going, and the rise of some of these younger guys has makes that $17 million cap number for a tight end on maybe the backside of his career like not nearly worth it. So if he's not willing to renegotiate, I could see them cutting him and just like taking like, fine, we'll just take the full $11 million. You can't catch a ball in the end zone anyways when it counts. And so that was a low blow. My apologies. And so
Sorry,
but
Mark.
he is, but he is has he's been a staple. Yeah, he's been a staple for this Ravens team over the past 7 years, and so, but I think he'll end up staying. I think the same potentially could be applied as well to Marlon Humphreys as well. We thought about cutting Marlon Humphreys, but because also too to clear up cap space for next year. But Marlon Humphreys had a great year this year. Let's see if they can run it back this year. But I also think too, if you're looking at like 2026 cap space as well, if he does awful in training camp and awful to start off the season, you can release him and then you're clearing up that cap space to begin with for
Yeah.
2026 as well, which I think is like 17 million in cap space. So
Yeah.
I think you keep these two guys that have been face of the franchises for Baltimore before moving on to making some of these other moves.
Yeah, no, and we did talk about that. I like there are other guys I think you could potentially talk about. Derrick Henry was one that was mentioned in a couple things that I read of like 31-year-old running back. Like definitely uh like history has not been kind to those guys, but Derrick Henry is maybe a little bit different in that conversation.
He's
But
not your even throughout history, he's not your average running back. It's like
he's not your
he's
average human. Like he's
that's
just
fair. That's a good point. Yeah.
yeah. But to be fair, none of these guys are like your average human. But
Yeah.
we did also release Marcus Williams. there, and then Arthur Mallet were also some cap casualties just to clear up a few more dollars there in cap space. And you probably already saw it, but we did extend Ronnie Stanley. So this is a void year for him. So he has some bonuses that he's already due for this season. So we gave him another $11 million just to kind of stick around. He might get more on the open market there, but I think just to kind of stay in Baltimore, I feel like he might take a little bit of a hometown discount. But we'll just have to see. But Ronnie Stanley does end up staying here as he was kind of extended for one more year.
Yeah, yeah. So a lot of the mainstay guys staying here with Baltimore. I feel like similar to Pittsburgh, they like to try and keep a lot of their guys there. And so I think that's going to be the route that they end up going here. And all these guys still provide quality, like some of the tops of quality comparative to their teammates as well, like with Humphreys, with Andrews, and with Stanley. So I think those moves make sense, but at the same time, though, too, I can understand an argument and a viewpoint to move on from those guys and maybe see if you can kind of replace some of those talents. Particularly, I think that's most prevalent with Andrews, just when it comes to overall production. So there's a couple of guys that we decided to keep internally as well as this cap move brought them up to about 30 million or so, 32 million or so. And so I
Mhm.
think one of the things too, when this secondary, this passing game really started to improve a lot was when Darius Washington started to get a lot more time as well. The combination of him and Kyle Hamilton really worked out in the back end of that secondary as well. And so I think they're going to want to keep Darius Washington in Baltimore. We were kind of unsure on this because he is a restricted free agent. So, but we think something of like 5 million, maybe even a little bit less, might be something the Ravens might end up going with. And so, uh, and I also think too with that, well, as also kind of tying this back into Marlon Humphreys, we are going to let Brandon Stevens walk, but you're going to have Marlon Humphreys. You drafted Nate Wiggins, and he's only going to keep getting better as well. Then you got Kyle Hamilton, who's one of the best safeties in the league, and then now Darius Washington, who fits really well into what you all are doing there. That's a very solid secondary that you have going on, and already too with this front seven in Baltimore, which is one of the best front sevens in the league, and how great they were at stopping the run. I think I could see this defense taking a massive step forward overall, especially even too statistically in the passing game, just because they started off so poorly in those first couple of weeks as well that they almost got behind the eight ball statistically. Now there's still some improvements that you would like to see them make, and I think they can address those in the draft when it comes to their
Yeah.
secondary, but still very solid top tier talent when it comes to their first string overall.
Yeah, no, and this is just a good defense. That secondary, like you said, is like the weaker point, but it's still, I think, pretty decent.
Yeah,
And then kind of going on to the next internal re-signing was Patrick Mercari. We were able to free up enough cap space. I definitely think eh, he could be one of the guys that they do let walk. Not because he's not a good player, but just because they don't have enough cap space if they don't make some of these moves and want to keep some of these guys. So they brought him back, keep that offensive line pretty much intact, and keep him there on that interior. Keep protecting Lamar Jackson and blocking for Derrick Henry. It's just good to keep that continuity. He was a really good player, took a big step forward this past season. And that's just not a player that you want to lose. So they go there and they re-sign him and bring him back for another season. And that's really it. I mean, we tried to get to around 15 million for teams to be able to sign their draft classes. And I think like for the Ravens in this case, we got right there. We were able to bring back a lot of the key members. And yeah, they did let a few guys go, but I don't think it's anybody that they'll really truly miss. Deontay Johnson is definitely not on that list of guys
he's
that
not.
will be
No,
missed.
I don't think they're going to miss him. One guy I could see them re-signing, going to be Patrick Ricard. He's another kind of one of those
Yeah.
staple guys as well, but he's a fullback. You can sign him cheaply as well.
Yeah.
And I also think too, just kind of in the grand scheme of things for the Ravens, is they do have 11 draft picks, and I think they're one of those teams also too. Historically, I feel like they've drafted decently well, and so I think that's where they're going to find a lot more of those skill position players. I think that's where they're going to find a lot more of that like interior or that like offensive line depth that they need, or even some of the defensive line depth as well. And so, because there's even a couple other guys that they could move on from that I don't even think we touched on, but like maybe Kyle Van Noy, they release, he's going to be 34. That would be $4 million in savings. And then with this edge class, maybe that's the route that they end up going. But that being said, though, Kyle Van Noy, I think, had one of the best careers of his year with like what 12 and a half sacks. So
Yeah.
it's those are just some other moves that they'd want to make if they want to start thinking about the future. But once again, though, too, keep Kyle Van Noy, go draft a young edge rusher that you think you could go and replace him over these next couple of years while you go and develop that player. So a lot of different routes I think Baltimore can end up going with their 11 picks. I think it's going to be interesting as well because especially too now with Lamar Jackson, I think their biggest thing is like how can they get more weapons? How can they get some more uh, like just playmakers that can help out Lamar Jackson? Because I like Zay Flowers, I like having Derrick Henry in the backfield. I think that's a great 1-2 combo. I like the tight end combination with Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely. Rashad Bateman had a good year. Nelson Aguilar had a good year, but also too, those aren't the guys that are going to take them over the edge. I also think too, Zay Flowers is like a 1B guy. No offense to Zay Flowers, but he's just with his slot position and with his speed. I think he's really good. Yes, but I think they still need that other like number one player or number one
Yeah.
receiver that they can really lean on that can absolutely break open a game.
So it does remind me a little bit, not obviously not in play style or like physical stature anyway, but it does remind me a little bit of like a Drake London in Atlanta, where it's like he's a really, really, really good like 1B receiver, but he's not a Stephon Diggs. He's not a Justin Jefferson. He's not one of these guys that can just come in here and totally take over a game.
Yeah.
And I would rather have that really, really good 1B receiver than not have him at all. It's just sometimes you just need somebody ahead of you to really maximize your skill set. And I feel like I agree with you there. I feel like they do need that. The good thing is for the Ravens though is that run game is so prominent, especially this past season, and then also too Isaiah Likely, Rashad Bateman, Nelson Aguilar picked things up. Like they had Mark Andrews too. Like they had so many different weapons that it kind of did the same thing, I think, for this offense where there were just so many options that it was so hard for defenses to cover all of them.
Yeah. Exactly. So it's the Ravens are right there. They've been right there the past couple years.
Yeah.
They just got to get there.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's go ahead. Let's wrap up this video here. If you guys have not already, please go ahead and like and subscribe. That is the best way to help out the channel. While you're down there, leave a comment on what you thought of this Ravens mock free agency. Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you have done differently? And other than that, we'll see you guys next time.